It's funny, I didn't even notice the for sale sign come down, but one morning there he was, standing in the driveway with a moving crew and a phone pressed to his ear. The house across from ours had been empty for what felt like forever. There's something a little depressing about an abandoned place staring back at you every day. It makes the whole street feel like it's holding its breath. So yeah, I was glad when someone finally moved in. I didn't realize then how important that feeling relief was going to be, how short-lived. Luca, he looked like he had it all together. Mid-20s, maybe late, tall, clean-cut, never left the house in anything less than designer sneakers. He had this matte gray Audi that glided more than it drove. The kind of car that says money without trying too hard. The first time he waved at me, he had a coffee in one hand and two phones in the other. Said he worked in digital media, something with content creators or online personalities. I nodded, pretending I understood. I didn't. Harold took to him faster than I did. He's better at people anyway. They'd chat out front about the market or whatever game was on. I'd hear them laughing sometimes from the porch. I liked the sound, made the street feel alive again. At first, Luca didn't seem all that different from the people I imagined used to live in that house. Young, ambitious, just getting started. A nice change from the silence. A nice change from nothing. But thinking back now, I wonder if it was ever actually quiet over there, or if I just wasn't listening close enough. I think it was maybe the second or third week after Luca moved in. The house was still half bare inside. You could tell by the way the windows looked empty at night. But she started showing up anyway. Same little red coupe each time. Always late morning or early afternoon, never too long. She parked like she belonged there, moved like she'd done it 100 times. That was the first thing that caught my attention. How comfortable she was walking in when Luca wasn't even home. At first, I figured maybe she was a cleaner, or a friend helping him unpack. Maybe even a girlfriend with a key. But it wasn't the what that bothered me. It was the how often, 2, sometimes 3 times a week, like clockwork. No knocks, no hesitation, just straight in through the front door. She was young, couldn't have been more than mid-20s, and dressed like she was always on her way to a rooftop party. Something about the way she carried herself told me she didn't care who was watching, but I watched anyway. That's what you do when you spend your afternoons on a porch with a lukewarm mug of tea and nothing but the breeze and the birds. You notice things. Thing is, I never once saw her with Luca. Not coming, not going. She'd be in and out and gone before his car ever rolled up. I never heard voices, never saw lights on. It was like she lived in the silence between his footsteps. Like she was part of the house and not his life. And the strangest part, she had a key. I don't know how I knew that at first, but I knew. And once you see something like that, it's hard not to start asking questions, even if you keep them to yourself. It was one of those heavy afternoons where the sun feels too close and everything's just a bit too still. I was trimming the hedges. Well, more like pretending to trim while actually watching a butterfly hop from one bloom to the next. When I heard raised voices cutting through the silence, I didn't turn around right away. Didn't want to look like I was paying attention, but the yelling didn't stop, and it was coming from Luca's driveway. I glanced over, slow and careful. It was her. Same red coupe parked crooked, door half open like she hadn't even bothered closing it properly. She was standing close to him, yelling. No, spitting words sharp and fast. I couldn't make out what she was saying, but the way her hands sliced through the air, it wasn't a lover's quarrel. There was something else in it. A sort of possession, like she was cornering him with words. Luca didn't say much. If he did, I didn't hear it. He just stood there, face blank, shoulders a little slumped. He didn't look angry. He looked tired, drained, like this wasn't new, just another round of something he thought he'd already survived. And then she peeled out of the driveway like she wanted the road to feel it. The tires screeched. I remember thinking she was going to hit the mailbox, or worse. Luca stood there for a second longer, then turned around and walked inside. No door slam, just quiet. I don't think he even realized I was out there. That was the moment. That was when I felt it. That gut-deep kind of wrongness you try to ignore because it's easier to pretend you didn't see what you saw. But I did, and something shifted after that. whether I wanted it to or not. And that's what really started to twist in my gut. Not the fight, not the yelling, but the quiet after. Because for all the fury I saw in that driveway, it didn't stop her from coming back. It wasn't like once or twice either. I counted at least 3 visits in the week that followed. Same car, same way in, middle of the day just like before. Luca's Audi wasn't there. Lights were off, no sign of him anywhere. She never knocked, never hesitated, just walked in like she had every right to be there, and stayed long enough to make me wonder what she was doing, or what she was looking for. I brought it up to Harold one night after dinner. Just sort of floated it out there, not trying to make a thing of it. He told me to leave it alone, said maybe it was some on-again, off-again thing and it wasn't for us to judge, and maybe he was right. But that didn't stop the chill from settling into my bones every time I saw her walk through that door like she owned it. I kept thinking, why was she still going in? After that fight, after the way she tore out of there, what reason did she have to keep showing up? And did Luca even know? I mean, did he give her that key, or did she find another way to get one? The house itself started to feel strange, like the air was heavier somehow. Nothing visible, nothing loud, but something was off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I could feel it in the pit of my stomach. Like the walls were holding on to something just beneath the surface pressing outwards. And no one was listening. It must have been around 2 or 3 in the morning, one of those hours where the whole world feels like it's holding its breath. I woke up to lights flashing across the ceiling like some kind of nightmare. Red, blue, red, blue. I thought maybe it was a fire truck at first, or that old man 2 doors down finally had a stroke. You get to a certain age and you start bracing yourself for those kinds of calls in the night. But it wasn't down the block. It was right across the street. I pulled on my robe and stepped out onto the porch, still half asleep. Harold was already behind me, muttering something under his breath, but I barely heard him. All I could focus on were the police cars stacked along the curb, lights spinning like a warning. The ambulance was parked sideways, engines still running. They were in Luca's house. I don't remember walking to the edge of the steps. I just remember the cold of the wood under my feet and how loud the quiet felt. Then the front door opened, and they brought her out first. The girl, Mara, I'd learn later. No resistance, no tears, just this blank stare, like nothing around her was real, like none of us existed. And then they brought him out. I didn't recognize him at first. There was too much blood. His face was pale, lips parted like he was gasping for something that wouldn't come. One of the paramedics yelled something, but it was muffled behind the sirens. I covered my mouth, and I felt the sound before I realized I was making it. A gasp, a real one, like my body couldn't pretend anymore. I thought I was past being shocked by anything. But that night rewired something in me. I still don't know how to describe it. It didn't feel real. None of it did, and maybe that's the part that haunts me the most. I wasn't sure if he'd even come back. To be honest, after that night the house just sat there. Dark, quiet, untouched. No car in the driveway. No lights flickering on at dusk. Just stillness. Like whatever had happened had pulled the soul out of the place. But then, one afternoon, I saw his car again, parked neatly like always. Like nothing had changed, except everything had. We gave it a day before going over. Not to pry, just to check. He opened the door like he'd been expecting us. No smile, no small talk, just nodded and stepped aside. The house was already halfway hollow. Boxes stacked near the front door, framed prints gone from the walls. You could see where the color didn't match behind where they used to hang. Something about that unsettled me more than I expected, like watching someone erase themselves in real time. Then he led us down the hall, said he wanted to show us something. I didn't know what to expect. The bathroom looked normal, clean, spare, forgettable. But then he pointed to the vent above the mirror, said he'd found something when cleaning out supplies. A tiny black device, a camera. I just stood there staring at it in his hand, trying to understand what it meant. Who even thinks to do something like that? He said the police didn't catch it, that there might be more. He didn't say it like he was accusing anyone, or trying to make a point. He just said it quietly, like he was telling himself out loud so it wouldn't sit too heavy in his chest. He didn't sound angry. He didn't even sound hurt. He just sounded scared. And for the first time I realized how long he must have been living that way. It all spilled out in pieces, like he'd been holding his breath for weeks and didn't quite know how to let it go. He sat on the edge of that half-packed sofa, not really looking at either of us, just sort of talking to the floor. Said she'd taken his spare key once while he was asleep, copied it, he figured. She started asking for things not long after. Small at first, a watch, a weekend away, some earrings he didn't remember agreeing to. Then it escalated, like she was testing how far she could reach. He said it got to the point where she always seemed to know where he was, what he'd just bought, who he was with. That was when he realized she'd been tracking him, through his phone. I didn't even know that was something people could do, still don't understand how, but he said she used it to show up when he was alone, or to stay away when she knew he was with company. Always one step ahead. He told us the fight I saw out in the driveway, that was him trying to end it, or at least to pause things, pull back. She wouldn't hear it, didn't yell, didn't cry, just stood there, furious and still. Said she left quietly that day, and came back louder. He didn't know how she got in that night, only that she did, and that he barely made it out. Said he didn't feel safe there anymore, not with people like her walking free, not with the thought that she might have told others where he lived. He moved out quietly, like he was trying not to wake something up, and now the house just sits. I still find myself watching it, even now, wondering what else I missed, wondering what was happening behind those walls long before any of us noticed. You ever look back at a decision and wonder if it was a mistake or just the only option you had? That's kind of how I feel about moving into evergreen houses. It wasn't glamorous, wasn't even convenient, but at the time, it felt like survival. So here's what happened. Sophomore year rolls around and I get screwed on housing. Dorm lottery didn't go my way, and I had like 2 weeks to figure out where I was going to live. Found this listing for a co-op style setup called Evergreen Houses. Sounded community-oriented and kind of cheap, so I jumped on it. It's basically 3 old Victorian homes, stitched together with the loosest sense of organization you can imagine. Like someone tried to create a little community out of spare parts and half-renters. It was fine. Not close to campus, but I had a bike and honestly I didn't mind the commute. Most of the people living there were students, mostly undergrads like me, some in grad school, and then a few that made you wonder how long they'd been around. There was this guy who looked like he'd been a senior since the Bush administration, and another who cooked at 2 a.m. every night without fail. But none of them stuck with me like the woman from House B. I noticed her the first day, couldn't miss her. Graying hair, weird limp, this kind of vacant expression, like she was standing in the room but hadn't really been in the room in years. Didn't talk to anyone, didn't smile, just watched. I remember thinking maybe she worked for the university or was someone's relative, but nobody ever said anything. And somehow, that made it worse. It was like everyone had silently agreed not to ask. You know how some moments don't hit you all at once? Like you're in the middle of it and it just feels off. Not scary yet, just wrong in a way your brain doesn't know how to process. That's what it felt like that night in the lounge. We had this shared space between House A and House B. Couches, secondhand rugs, flickering lights, a busted foosball table. People hung out there in the evenings, made noise, played music, swapped class gossip, whatever. That night was no different. I was standing by the microwave, waiting for some instant ramen to not suck, and that's when I saw her. She was just standing there. Not near anyone, not part of the conversation. No book in her hand, no food, no phone, not even leaning on the wall like she was tired. Just standing, still, watching. At first I assumed she was waiting for someone, or maybe she was zoned out. It happens, right? But 5 minutes passed, then 10, and she didn't move, not a single step. Eyes just kind of glazed over, scanning the room without actually looking at anything. Or maybe she was looking, maybe at me. That was the part I couldn't shake. Every time I glanced her way, it felt like her gaze shifted with mine. Not in a dramatic horror movie head turn kind of way, just subtly, like the slow, deliberate kind of stare you don't even realize you're returning until it's too late. What really got to me though was how nobody else even flinched. People were laughing, talking about some group project, and she was right there, like a statue someone dropped into the background. I kept expecting someone to ask who she was or why she was there. No one ever did, not once. I remember it was late, later than I should have been up. Honestly, I was supposed to be finishing a paper, but I'd ended up pacing around my room instead, half distracted and trying to shake off that wired before bed kind of feeling. The house was quiet, the way it usually got past midnight. I glanced out the window without thinking. Just one of those bored, automatic things you do when your brain needs a reset. That's when I saw her. She was standing right in the middle of Oak Ridge, the narrow street that cuts through the 3 evergreen houses. No sidewalk, no curb, just dead center of the road. No movement, no reason, just standing there looking up at the house, at my window, I think. It was freezing out. You could see your breath that week. She wasn't wearing anything heavy. No coat, no gloves, nothing that made sense for being outside that late. At first I just stared, waiting for her to move or cross the road, or do something. But she didn't. I waved. I don't even know why. Maybe to make it feel normal. Maybe to convince myself it was normal. That was the mistake. The second my hand lifted, her whole body seemed to snap awake. She bounced in place, this weird jittery movement, almost excited, then turned and sprinted toward her building. Fast. Too fast for someone who usually moved like her bones ached. I didn't know what to do after that. I just stood there, staring at the spot she'd been. I kept the light off the rest of the night, pulled the blinds shut but didn't sleep. I just laid there, asking myself why I waved, why I gave her something to respond to, and what exactly I'd just agreed to. That bike was the only reason I thought Evergreen wouldn't be a nightmare. When I moved in, I told myself, it's far, yeah, but with the bike, I'll manage. 15 minutes to campus. Tops. It made living there feel like a compromise I could live with. Until the day it didn't. It was a weekday morning. Not even anything unusual. I remember I was running late for class and flying down the usual slope by the train overpass. I must have hit that hill 100 times. I knew every crack in the pavement. So when the brakes gave out halfway down, I knew something was wrong immediately. There was no warning. Just nothing. The squeeze of the handle met no resistance. The kind of dead pull that makes your stomach drop before your brain catches up. I veered hard off the road, ditched onto this patch of wet grass, nearly went over the handlebars. Could have been worse. A lot worse. There were cars. There was traffic. If I'd panicked a second longer, I probably wouldn't be telling this story. After I caught my breath, I checked the cables. Clean cut. Not frayed. Not worn. Cut, like scissors or a knife. Something sharp and precise. Not the kind of thing that just happens. Not wear and tear. I didn't report it. What would I even say? That someone was trying to hurt me. That someone messed with my brakes in a house full of strangers I barely knew. It sounded paranoid even to me, but from that day on I locked everything. My room, my backpack, even drawers. It made me feel a little better. Not safe, just less exposed. That's the thing about fear. It doesn't need to make sense. It just needs a place to live. There's a point where you start to question everything. Whether you're just overthinking things. Whether you're imagining connections that aren't there. I'd been trying to convince myself that all of it, the weird looks, the street incident, the bike, maybe none of it was connected. Maybe it was just coincidence. A string of creepy but separate events. And then I opened my door and saw her standing there. It was sometime past midnight. I'd gotten up for water, or maybe to check if I'd locked the front door. I don't even remember. The hallway was completely dark, except for the dim light bleeding in from the stairwell. She was right outside my room, facing me. Still, I didn't hear her footsteps. No doors creaking, just opened mine and there she was. Like she'd been waiting. Or worse, like she lived there. Like that hallway belonged to her and I was the intruder. I froze. She didn't react. Didn't flinch. Didn't say anything. just turned around slowly and walked away down the hall back toward the shared bathroom. No urgency, no acknowledgement, like I didn't matter. I stood there for, I don't know how long, just staring at the empty space where she'd been. I couldn't move. I didn't go back to bed. I just sat on the edge of my mattress with every light on, trying to process what had just happened. I kept thinking, what if I hadn't opened the door? How long had she been standing there? What was she waiting for? And the worst part was knowing I couldn't prove any of it. Even if I told someone, what would they do? They'd shrug. They'd say she's harmless. They always did. Or maybe they knew something I didn't. Losing the key felt like a minor inconvenience at the time. I had a backup tucked in the drawer with old mail and charger cables. Everyone lost theirs eventually. It wasn't a big deal, but now looking back, that lost key feels like a countdown I didn't know had started. It was a Thursday night, I think. Could have been Friday. I remember waking up, not jolting awake, just slowly realizing I was no longer asleep. There was this sound, faint, inconsistent, a soft bump every few seconds, like someone shifting their weight or nudging something. It wasn't loud enough to be alarming, just wrong. I laid there for a while, convincing myself it was a pipe, maybe an animal in the walls. But the longer I listened, the more I could tell it wasn't coming from behind the wall. It was inside the room. Close. The closet. I didn't want to move, but I knew I had to. Every step toward it felt like walking into something I wouldn't be able to undo. I don't even remember reaching for the handle. I just remember that cold breath of air when the door opened, and she was in there, crouched, eyes locked on me like she'd been waiting. She didn't blink. One of my belts was hanging loosely from her neck like a scarf, and she had a knife in her hand, one from the shared kitchen. I didn't freeze. I wish I had. I screamed, she lunged, and we crashed into each other. I don't remember the order of things, the belt falling off, the knife hitting the floor, her shrieks, my voice cracking from yelling. Devin must have heard. He helped pull her off. After that, it's a blur. Police, questions, blank faces, and me still trying to figure out what would have happened if I hadn't woken up. They told us later. After the police reports, after the statements, after it was too late for it to matter, that she was the property owner's sister. She wasn't even supposed to be living there. She didn't pay rent, didn't sign anything. No one had background info, no records, no vetting. He just put her in one of the vacant rooms and kept quiet about it. Like maybe if no one asked, it wasn't a problem. And I guess no one did ask. Or if they did, they didn't push hard enough. He got arrested. Negligence, I think. Probably other stuff too. I didn't follow the trial or hearing or whatever happened. I didn't want to. Everyone else just kind of moved on. The house stayed open. New people moved in. The ones who were there when it happened barely talk about it anymore. It became one of those stories people mention in whispers, like a warning, but never in the full version, never with the details. Me? I didn't move on. Not really. I still think about that night, more often than I'd like to admit. I think about how quiet it was, about how she looked, crouched in my closet like she belonged there, about how close she was, how easy it would have been for that knife to move a little faster, for me to have been a little slower, and I still don't know why it was me. I go over it in my head sometimes, trying to trace it back. The wave from the window, the glance in the lounge. Did I remind her of someone? Was there even a reason? I'll never know. And that's the part that stays with me. Graduation's coming up. People keep asking what I'll miss. I don't have the heart to tell them I'm just grateful to be leaving with the door still locked behind me. You ever reach a point where everything familiar just starts feeling radioactive? That was me. Back in the city, things got messy. I won't get into all the details. Let's just say it started with a relationship and ended with me feeling like a ghost in my own life. Staying there wasn't an option anymore. I needed out, a clean slate. That's how I ended up in Bellevue Hollow. It looked like the kind of neighborhood you'd see in one of those real estate ads. Lawns so well manicured it felt like the grass signed a contract. Driveways wide enough to park dreams. You know the type. Mostly young families, a few retirees sprinkled in. People waved. They asked if I had kids. A wife. I'd just smile, shake my head, tell them I worked remote and wanted somewhere quiet. And it was quiet, almost too quiet. My house wasn't anything extravagant, just a modest 2-story with decent bones. I didn't care about curb appeal. I just wanted a roof, a door I could lock, and space from the past. That was the draw, really. The space. Every house in the neighborhood had breathing room between them, except for mine and the one next door. That house, Julian's house, though I didn't know his name yet, was too close. Not like bad city zoning close, more like someone shoved a full-sized mansion into a cul-de-sac made for cottages. It didn't make sense. It was big, bigger than mine by far, and it loomed. Even when I wasn't looking at it, I could feel it there. Watching, I remember thinking, weird placement, but whatever. That's how it always starts, right? You overlook one small, strange detail because you're too busy trying to move on. By the time I got around to introducing myself to the neighbor next door, I'd already met half the cul-de-sac. Same mold, different faces. Parents wrangling toddlers, couples with golden retrievers, retirees pruning bushes like it was a competitive sport. Everyone smiled the same smile. Warm, polished, maybe a little performative. I figured the guy next door would be just another version of that. He wasn't. When the door swung open, I actually paused. Julian. I'd find out his name later. Looked like he belonged in a college garage band, not in a pristine suburb surrounded by Tesla dads and PTA moms. He couldn't have been much older than me, maybe younger. Hair was long in the back, full-on mullet. His grin was wide, a little too wide. The kind of smile that tries to be disarming but ends up just off. I remember thinking, not what I expected. He told me he worked in finance, but not the kind of finance that comes with details, just the word. No firm, no title, just finance. The conversation didn't last long. He was polite, but the kind of polite that's built like a wall. Kept saying he was busy, always busy. I did ask if he lived there alone. I probably shouldn't have, but it slipped out. He said yeah, alone, which made 0 sense, because that house was massive. 4-car garage, columns, wraparound porch. You could fit an entire family reunion in there, and still have room for a trampoline. But I didn't push. Honestly, I was just glad someone around here was under 40. Still, something didn't sit right. I couldn't tell if he was hiding something or if I just really needed things here to feel normal. Maybe both. It was a Wednesday. I remember that clearly, because I had a meeting the next morning I wasn't looking forward to. I'd gone to bed early, trying to get some actual rest, when the music started. Loud. Not neighbor having a drink loud, more like full-on house party loud. Bass thumping, people shouting, that kind of chaotic energy you feel in your chest. At first I thought I was dreaming, but it just kept going. When I got up and looked out the window, his driveway was packed. 6, maybe 7 cars, all lined up like something major was happening. Julian's house, the one that had been dead quiet for weeks, was now pulsing like a club in the middle of suburbia. I didn't want to be that neighbor, the one who shows up with complaints and a frown, but I also couldn't sleep with that kind of noise, so I threw on a hoodie and walked over. I thought maybe I'd just knock, keep it friendly, ask if he could turn it down a notch. But when I got to the door, it was unlocked. That should have been the first red flag, but instead of thinking logically, I chalked it up to party behavior. I stepped inside expecting to see a crowd, drinks, people lounging on couches. Nothing. The house was spotless, empty. No one in the living room, no one in the kitchen. But the foyer, it was filled with shoes, all sizes, neatly placed like they belonged to real guests. Except there weren't any. And then I listened. What I thought was music wasn't. It was a recording. Laughter, clinking glasses, conversations, all on a loop. No rhythm, no variation. Like someone had built a party from scratch and forgot to invite the people. I keep replaying that moment, standing in the foyer, fake party sounds echoing around me. Shoes lined up like ghosts had taken them off. I had every reason to leave, and I almost did. But then I saw it. A door near the back hallway barely cracked open, just enough to catch my attention. I don't even remember choosing to go in. It felt like something else took over. Curiosity, adrenaline. I don't know. My legs moved, and I followed. The stairs led down into black. Not total darkness, but that kind of dim that makes shadows stretch. I thought about calling out, but something about the air down there made my throat tighten. It smelled sharp, like bleach, or ammonia, something sterile and strong enough to sting the inside of my nose. Not what you'd expect from a party cleanup. Not even close. And then there was the noise. This mechanical whine, steady and pulsing, grinding in rhythm like a piece of machinery that wasn't meant to run quietly. A saw, maybe, or a press. Something industrial, not residential. And under that sound, faintly, I thought I heard something else. Could have been a hum, could have been breathing. I stayed close to the wall, inching down until I could see into the basement. 3 men stood there, backs to me, all older, wearing thick rubber gloves, goggles, heavy boots, not costumes, not party gear, work clothes, real ones. The kind you wear when you're dealing with something messy. They weren't speaking, just staring at something I couldn't see across the room. I couldn't tell what they were looking at. I didn't want to know. Then the light shifted behind me, just slightly, enough to feel the air shift too, like someone had closed the door. I didn't wait. I don't remember running, but I remember the feeling, that rush of cold behind my ears, lungs barely keeping up, heart slamming so hard it felt like it might bruise something. I went out the back way, hopped my own fence, and didn't stop until I was inside. Door locked, lights off, hands still shaking. I didn't turn anything on, just crept up to my office, crawled under the windowsill and peeked out. I needed to know if someone had followed me, if I'd been seen. At first, nothing. Then the front door across the way flew open. Guys started pouring out. 8, 9, all older. None of them were Julian. That much I knew. These weren't neighbors. They weren't dressed for a party. Work boots, utility jackets. One had what looked like a stain on his sleeve. Couldn't tell what it was in the dark. They weren't yelling, but they were tense. Movements sharp. One of them shoved another, hard, like they were arguing over something that had gone wrong. And then just silence. They didn't scatter, didn't get in the cars, just went back inside like it never happened. And a minute later the music stopped. Not faded, stopped, like someone flipped a switch. I stayed there under the window for what felt like forever, just trying to figure out if I was going crazy, if I'd hallucinated the whole thing. But I didn't. I know what I saw. The fake party, the men in the basement. That sound. I didn't imagine it. I couldn't have. The problem is, I was the only one who saw any of it, and if they didn't know it was me that night, I didn't want to give them a reason to find out. After that night, I tried to do the logical thing. Put it behind me. I didn't step foot near Julian's property, didn't text, didn't look too long in his direction. Just kept my head down, told myself whatever was going on over there wasn't my business anymore. Curiosity got me once. It wasn't going to get me again. Then I found the camera. It was maybe 4 or 5 days later. I was out back, just doing something normal, trimming branches along the edge of the property. I wasn't even thinking about that night. My mind had actually gone quiet for once. And then I saw it, wedged up between 2 limbs, tucked into the fork of a tree, like it had been placed there with real intention. A trail cam. Camo pattern, motion activated, compact. I almost missed it. I only noticed it because the light caught the lens for a split second when I moved. It had a SIM card. That part stuck with me. It meant someone wasn't just recording, they were watching remotely. And the worst part, the angle. It wasn't aimed at Julian's house. It was locked dead on at my office window. The one I had crouched beneath the other night. The one I spent most of my day sitting in front of. I held it in my hands, not sure if I should be panicking or just throwing up. How long had it been there? A week? A month? Longer? Was it recording me? Waiting for something? I didn't tell anyone. I couldn't. It felt too big, too unreal. I just stood there, camera in hand, staring back at my own house like it belonged to someone else. And I remember thinking, was I supposed to find this? Or did I find it too late? Julian disappeared. Just like that. No note, no moving truck, no sign of life. One day his car was there. The next it wasn't. A week passed, then two, then more. His lawn started creeping higher. Leaves gathered on his porch. A stack of packages leaned awkwardly against the door. Same ones, same positions, untouched like everything else in that house. No one seemed to notice. At first, I thought maybe I was overthinking, that maybe he'd gone on a trip, but after a month of silence, I started asking around. Not directly, just casually. Like, hey, did you hear that party Julian had a while back? The one on that random Wednesday night? Blank stares. Polite confusion. One neighbor even smiled and said they hadn't heard anything unusual. Not even the music. And these are people with toddlers. You'd think they'd notice a subwoofer shaking the block past midnight. But no, either they really didn't hear it, or they were pretending not to. I don't know which idea messes with my head more, because I remember it all too clearly. That awful chemical sting in the air, the mechanical noise, the way the fake laughter echoed through an empty house, the pile of shoes with no feet to fill them, the men in the basement, whoever they were, what they were doing. And then there's the camera, aimed at me, not at him. It's been months now, and I still find myself watching that house like it might twitch, like something might shift behind the curtains. Sometimes I think about going back, just walking over there, and opening the door, seeing if what I saw was real. But what if someone's still inside? What if Julian comes back? What if I already crossed a line I don't even understand?